It's Monday, the 7th of March. Good morning, Europe. A very warm welcome to the programme. Let's begin by looking at our top stories.
Civilian casualties increase as Russia intensifies its assault on Ukraine's cities. President Zelensky calls it deliberate murder and says Ukraine won't forget. A probe into possible war crimes opens in The Hague. The US says there are credible reports of deliberate attacks on civilians. 1.5 million people have fled Ukraine in the last 10 days. It's the fastest growing refugee crisis since World War II.
Civilians and soldiers are preparing to defend the Ukrainian capital as Russia steps up its shelling of cities to the north and south of Kyiv and continued it long into Sunday night. Despite that, a third round of talks between Russia and Ukrainian leaders is planned for today.
The day before, we had battles here. There were tanks, enemy infantry, fighting vehicles, artillery, rocket-propelled grenade launchers. Behind us, you can see the house was destroyed.
Casualties are increasing with Russia's relentless bombardment. Eyewitnesses say 4 people died, including 2 children, as a result of shelling in Irpin, near Kyiv, on Sunday.
Russia has officially announced that tomorrow there will be shelling of our territory, our factories, our defence complex. Most were built decades ago, even by the Soviet government. And they were built in cities, and now they are in the middle of ordinary urban environments. Thousands of people work there. Hundreds of thousands live nearby. This is murder, deliberate murder.
Buses line up, waiting to take people evacuated from besieged Mariupol to safety. But a second attempt at a ceasefire and a chance for civilians to leave only lasted a couple of hours before shelling restarted, trapping civilians who had begun their escape. Russian President Vladimir Putin shifted blame for the invasion, saying Moscow's attacks could be halted only if Kyiv ceases hostilities. Meanwhile, the port city of Odessa is the latest to brace itself for a Russian attack.
The International Court of Justice is holding its first hearings today into allegations of war crimes in Ukraine. The case, filed by Kyiv, says Moscow launched its invasion of Ukraine based on false claims of acts of genocide in the Luhansk and Donetsk regions of eastern Ukraine, and is now carrying out genocidal acts of its own as it targets civilian areas with relentless shelling. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who is in Lithuania as part of a tour of NATO member nations in Eastern Europe, says he's seen intelligence of Russian abuses. We've seen very credible reports of deliberate attacks on civilians, he said, which would constitute a war crime. We've seen very credible reports on the use of certain weapons, and what we're doing right now is documenting all of this. In a separate counterclaim, Russia's defense ministry says that during what it calls its special military operation, it's found evidence of Kyiv trying to clear away traces of a military biological program, which Moscow says was funded by the US. Meanwhile, the nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, is concerned that staff at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant are being told what to do by the Russian military commander, who seized the site last week. Any interference with the technical running of the plant is in violation of international safety protocols. And in the south of France, where EU foreign ministers are meeting today, the refugee crisis and how to prepare for an estimated 4 million displaced Ukrainians likely to flee the war will be at the heart of discussions, along with much needed humanitarian aid.
Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen says her country will hold a referendum in June to decide whether or not to join the European Union's common security and defence policy. Denmark opted out of the EU common policies in 1992, but announcing the move on Sunday, Frederiksen says the Russian invasion of Ukraine has heralded a new time, a new reality. 10 Baltic nations are currently taking part in UK-led military exercises on Danish soil. Defence Minister Morten Budskov has said he will boost the country's military spending to meet the NATO target of 2% of gross domestic product by 2033. While Copenhagen has opted out of the EU's common policies in the past, the government says historical times call for historical decisions.
There are growing concerns about an amphibious landing in the port city of Odessa on the Black Sea in southern Ukraine. This follows the sinking of an Estonian vessel hit by Russian artillery off the port last Thursday. Residents formed a human chain on Friday to fill sandbags in preparation for a possible Russian attack. I am here to protect the city. I am helping with cooking and filling the sandbags and cleaning up. Over there is my house. We have to defend it. That's how we were raised. Volunteers and NGOs in Lviv in western Ukraine are wrapping statues, stained glass windows and other cultural monuments across the city in order to protect them against a possible Russian attack. You know, it takes time to get to Lviv. Troops will not reach it fast. But when it comes to a small nuclear strike, I believe that Lviv could be a potential target. Rights groups and Russian authorities say nearly 4,000 people have been detained during a series of anti-war protests across Russia this Sunday. The OVD rights groups say detentions took place in 53 cities across the country, and around 1,700 people were detained in Moscow alone. OVD Info also say that in the last 11 days, more than 10,000 people have been detained for protesting against the war. And numerous rallies have taken place across Russia since the beginning of the invasion, despite new laws being passed to crack down on protesters. On Sunday, Russian state TV showed mass rallies held across the country in support of what Russia is still calling the special military operation in Ukraine. And motor rallies with flags flying from car windows and stickers saying "For Victory" were held along the central streets of several cities. People also laid flowers at memorials and sang war songs.
The International Gymnastics Federation has opened disciplinary proceedings against Russian gymnast Ivan Kulyak. The decision comes after the 20-year-old wore a Z symbol on his chest whilst claiming a bronze medal on the podium of the Gymnastics World Cup in Doha. He was next to the Ukrainian gold medalist Kovtan Ilya when the event occurred. The Z, which has been seen on Russian tanks in Ukraine, has become the symbol of support for the invasion. The International Gymnastics Federation has called the gymnasts' behaviour shocking. All Russian and Belarusian gymnasts have been banned from future competitions.
The Spanish public broadcaster RTVE has decided to temporarily cease activities in Russia. This is in response to a new law that carries penalties of up to 15 years in prison for publishing what authorities consider fake news about the war in Ukraine.
It is sad and painful to leave Russia like this after 5 years. I would never have imagined having to pack my things in a few hours and having to leave in a hurry without knowing if I'll be able to return. The situation is deteriorating rapidly. In the last few hours, the feeling was that either you leave now or tomorrow it might not be possible, because there might not be any flights left. The borders might be closed, or martial law might be imposed. From today, we journalists have also become Putin's target, with this law that criminalizes our work.
Italian television broadcaster Rai announced that it too was suspending coverage in Russia in order to ensure the safety of its journalists and to safeguard the freedom of information.
Britain's opposition Labour Party is calling for an inquiry into how the son of a former KGB agent was elevated to the House of Lords. New reports claim that the security services had deemed Evgeny Lebedev a potential security risk. But Prime Minister Boris Johnson intervened in the process and the assessment was reframed. Medvedev has British and Russian citizenship and owns the UK's Evening Standard newspaper. He was nominated to a life peerage in 2020. Justice Secretary Dominic Raab has denied there was any impropriety in the appointment process. But the row comes as Johnson faces increased pressure over Russian donations to the Conservative Party and his government's slow response to sanctions on Russian oligarchs in the UK.